Is level 1 autism valid? I'm hearing mixed things. Let's dive into it. Hi, I'm Jade. I'm a private therapist. I run JMS Wellbeing, and I am also somebody who is diagnosed with autism level 1. So you might already be able to preconceive my take on where I stand on this matter. However, I'm going to break this video down where I'm going to look into two videos in particular. One from 7 Ahead, absolutely phenomenal family. Please go and follow their channel. Incredible content. And also Jubilee, also equally incredible content. And it is basically the insight that I have found as I've kind of been exploring my own diagnosis, and how I think I first expected to get some pushback because it is a late diagnosis, of people who just don't believe that it is valid because they can't see it themselves. And although I did expect it, I think I didn't necessarily expect it from the actual autistic community or the people supporting people with autism. And I'm going to delve into that too. So the framework of how I'm going to run this video is I am going to give you the insight in what I've experienced and what I've seen on what people's basically views on autism. And then I'm going to end the video with my personal takeaway and my personal experience. So something that I've noticed is that people seem to have very rigid and fixed views on what autism is and autism looks like. And I knew to an extent the amount of resistance that people may have to changing their mind on something that they've had a fixed view on for so long. And although the DSM-5 criteria is absolutely evolved to include that the presentation isn't always as visible as we would like it to be, because how simple would that be if it was just that? But we've come to learn that it isn't just that, and we've missed a whole group of people who are suffering at the cost of not being picked up and not having their needs met. Because something I want to preempt is whether you have level 1, level 2 or level 3 autism, and all in my mind are valid, you require support needs for all. And yes, I will absolutely include that the further up the level you go, the more support you will need, the more inclusive and extensive support you will need. But basically, I want to jump into the fact that although that's true, and getting people to change their mind is fairly difficult, and why that is, because I think that we all become protective of who we are and what we know to be true about us. So if we've got a fixed idea, if we've got an idea that we've accepted into our belief system, it's quite difficult to challenge that within ourselves. So that's just me remaining fair and understanding that it's going to take a little bit more work to get people on board to change their mind. But the thing that I didn't expect is that people within the autistic community, and I don't actually mean the autistic people themselves, but I mean the support network of the people with autism, or the loved ones of the people who are supporting people with level 3 autism. I'm seeing some sort of pullback, that they find that because their struggles are so incredibly high, and they may have spent a lifetime fighting for the provision that those people need. And I understand just how difficult that is, because although my son isn't level 3, I have spent a lifetime being on the battlefield, asking for his basic human rights and differentiation to happen. So I do understand it. But because they have spent a lifetime in that place where the needs are very, very visible and everybody can see that for what it is, there is some element of pullback that they don't necessarily want level 1 autism to be included in saying that it's the same as the struggle of people with level 3 autism. And something else that I find is that because people have a very fixed view about whether autism is visible, we have to get clear on what it is that is visible to them that makes them go, aha, that person has autism, and I don't need to challenge that in any way. And that would be the 2 pillars, which is somebody with such extreme support needs. They may have also comorbid conditions, they may be nonverbal, they may have other additional support needs like learning difficulties, or alternatively, with obviously, like I say, where they might need around the clock care, things like that. Or the other one would be where they are extremely gifted, and again, you can't get away from seeing or noticing both. So somebody who is extremely gifted could be your Elon Musk or your Bill Gates, who both are on the autistic spectrum. And I think that when you fall into those two pillars, you are a lot more likely to be kind of like, aha, that person has autism. And it will just be kind of naturally accepted. And we have to also account for the fact that the reason why many people believe this is because this narrative is pushed. It is constantly pushed as to that is what autism is. And there is a missing the people in the middle who don't actually fall into either camp, but they still meet the criteria of autism and have received a diagnosis.
A lot of like the mainstream representation are quote unquote like super intelligent white autistic males, but that's all there really is. And for me, I'm not like Sean on The Good Doctor. I think we've definitely made some good progress with certain things, but I just remember growing up, it was always like superficial stereotype. And I just would love to see autism represented in a way that's more nuanced, with like particularly with women. Like not all autistic women are Temple Grandin. And as brilliant as she is, but that's not, that the problem is they want to take these like pillars and just kind of think that like these are the only options. It's either like the worst of the worst or the best of the best, and that's not fair. And it's not.
The reason I love this video is because it's clear to see that I am not on my own, and that other people also see that there is this idea that if you don't belong to either one of these, then how do I know? How do I know what it is that you're struggling with, and how can I basically accept that you have autism? But I also find this video really interesting because they're going to basically, so that's kind of starting with the agenda that the representation of autism needs to be more inclusive to the differences in presentation, as well as the differences in people being able to pick up and support somebody who also has autism. And then it goes on to basically Abby's mum. You might know Abby from Love on the Spectrum. I absolutely love Abby. And her mum basically goes on to start well, but she goes on to basically say that autism is now trendy, and that it is trending so much that people now believe they're on the autistic spectrum, and they're all getting diagnosis at a late age, despite basically meeting one part of the criteria, for having a sensory need. And that is just fundamentally, factually incorrect. However, there is a couple of people there, and I understand that this can happen, who start to agree with her that autism is now trendy. And I will share the video in a minute, but I can honestly say that I don't think that this is true.
So my thing is, I wish that the term spectrum keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what it doesn't do is honor the individual skill sets.
Right.
Like, you have an incredible skill set. You just got your AA. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, and your son sounds amazing and loving and sweet, and you know what that is because you spend all your time with him. And this charm right here, it's amazing. But what bothers me the most is that in the media, like TikTok, for example, I guess it's trending to be autistic, and I'm very worried about this. Yeah. It's trending.
Magic with Thomas.
Well, what I'd like to say is, if you have sensory issues, you're now called autistic. I grew up with a brother who had sensory issues. He is not autistic. Well, now you're clumped in with that. So then what is the representation if there's literally not 3 levels, but 50 levels of functioning?
50 levels of functioning?
Yeah, it's confusing.
Right,
like on TikTok, you'll see like someone with 8 million followers on TikTok who's a comedian, who's the funniest person ever, and I'm an amazing fan of, is looking for an autism diagnosis at 35 with a college degree and 2 kids, and you go, oh, I wonder what that is for them, because did you have any speech therapy? What is it, and why do you feel you need that diagnosis? But that media attention is what's permeating the rest disgust of people who are not familiar with autism, thinking, oh, I don't like loud noises. I hate the sun. I must too be autistic. And that's a worry for me.
That maybe there is definitely a group of people, especially within the community, who are now not just seeing it as bad, and they're promoting acceptance. It's a little bit like the Black Pride thing, which would be that I'm proud to be black, but I'm not proud to be black because I'm saying that I'm better. I'm proud to be black because I've been told all my life that that makes me not good enough. That is something that I will be slandered for. That is something that I'll be rejected for. That is something that I could be intentionally hurt for. That is something that leaves me in a low position in society because of. So I'm going to do the opposite of that thing, and I'm going to start driving forward the agenda that actually I like who I am. And that's going to make you uncomfortable, and I'm going to promote it in a positive way. So I think that that is what people are seeing. I also think that there might be a small minority of people who absolutely love the idea of being gifted. Who wouldn't? I'd love to be a gifted person. And it's something that we all, to a degree, like the idea that we stand out for the right reasons, and that is an agenda all of its own. However, I can promise you somebody would not get an autism diagnosis for this, because you have to meet all the criteria. And something that I also noted at the end of my assessment was that she fundamentally had to identify that it impacts me to this day, and it has impacted me lifelong, as well as I had to have an informant report from, which was my mum, but anybody who's known you for that amount of time can do it, to show that this is not just I like the idea of that now, I've got one sensory difficulty that I struggle with, like loud noises, and I now meet the criteria. That isn't how this works. So I firstly want to acknowledge that I do understand where I think she's called Christine is coming from, in the sense of she's had this lifelong battle with getting Abby's support needs met and helping her to talk and to communicate. And Abby actually goes on to say this herself, and to help her get into a place where she can now begin to thrive. And how it might to her feel invalidating that somebody could have the same support needs and meet the same criteria and somehow go undetected. I could understand why that might feel like a kick in the teeth to her. But the problem is that she can only see, and this is something that I really want to zone in on, she can only see it from her perspective. It's the Einstein's theory of relativity, which is the position of the observer will influence the phenomenon of what is being observed, and it will affect the results of the observation. The unexamined assumptions of the scientist both determine and limit what he or she will discover. And this is true for everybody, by the way. So when I say this, I'm not in any way critiquing or bad-mouthing Abby's mum, because I understand it. I do understand it. It's this idea that the only experience she's had of autism is her lifelong struggle to get her daughter's needs met and to help her thrive. So she can see it from that lens. And if we imagine it like a lens going over our eyes, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to take on board that there is another perception to consider, and that other perception has its own difficulties, which would be masking. And the fundamental damage of masking, and quick disclaimer, please click out now if this makes you uncomfortable, but the suicidality connected with masking and the lifelong blending, if you will, when you feel and you know you're different and you are abandoning self all of your life in order to just try to meet the fundamental need of acceptance and not feel abandonment or rejection. I understand why there might be an element of frustration within the community of people who have children or loved ones who are level 3 autism, who have level 3 autism. I understand it, but I think that in the same way that you have had that lifelong struggle, would it be important to include that although the struggle might not be identical, the foundations of it are, and that, as in the foundations of the diagnosis are, which means that even though, you know, there is the varying degrees now of the spectrum, and we're seeing it more from that point of view, that comes with its own struggles itself, and it would be extremely invalidating to consider that it's not going to affect them, even though you don't feel like that's visible. So I want to go on to now a video from 7 Ahead, and they are absolutely incredible. And the reason I really, really like this woman is that she's done a video on people that you might not know who are autistic, and it's almost like the exact thing that I was saying before, which is this empowerment video, which is this idea that you absolutely can belong to this community that spend a lifetime being judged, whether we like to admit that to be true or not, that you're less alone, and that actually, did you know? And is it, maybe we need to include a more inclusive perspective on the matter, and actually some of these people could be your favourite people, and how great it is that you have some similar thread of identity that actually overlaps. And I think that the intention behind the video was phenomenal and really great and delivered brilliantly. I watched it from start to finish and I found it really insightful. But then I went to the comment section, and disclaimer before I say it, I imagine this mum also falls into the very similar category of Abby's mum. So one of the comments was, Asperger's is so different level 1 compared to level 3. Non-verbal is just drastically different. It really concerns me. I have a child with severe autism. I have a brother-in-law with severe autism, and he recently passed away. He needed 24-hour care, and I get it, when you're high functioning, it's autism, to celebrate how you can do everything everyone else can. But it's hard, and that's not necessarily true, but I get it. But it's hard when you are alone in this community because your child is not high functioning and it's not level 1. It is what it is, I guess. And the other comment that I also saw was that she found it, she said, my son will never be a Bill Gates, and he will never get to thrive, I guess, and that's the outside view, in the same capacity as people with level 1 autism. And it is a little bit upsetting and frustrating for her that she feels like it's frustrating for her that they are in the same category, because the category is so broad because it's a spectrum. And firstly, do I understand what they're talking about? Of course I do. Of course I do. There is now a community basically coming out from the woodwork, basically beginning to band together. And many of those people probably sit in level 1 or level 2 autism. And it is exceptionally difficult for the people in level 3, maybe because of their care needs, or maybe because, you know, of the comorbid needs, or maybe also because they might be nonverbal, that where is the community for those people? And I can hear the frustration. I can hear how everybody, I can't stress this enough, wants their children to thrive, and they want basically for them to live a happy and prosperous and fulfilled life, and they feel like that's probably been taken away from them, and that their struggle is so real. It requires basically 24-hour care, and that sometimes it maybe can even be life limiting. And I understand it. I hear it loud and clear. But I also cannot begin to invalidate the community of people like myself who, although the struggle is not the same as that, they also do struggle. And there is a lens in which, because I've had the experience of living it, I can see through that. I understand why they might not be able to see through that. And something that I really liked that the 7 Ahead family commented was that their sons have, and I'll input the comment here, their sons have differing needs, because one has level 1 autism and the other has level 3. So rather than push back at the idea that one should belong to the community and one should not. They just said that basically they believe that it is quite a difficult challenge to get people to see and get the support needs met because they are so different. However, the foundation of what they struggle with, although again, from the spectrum point of view, it might differ in areas, they meet the criteria nonetheless. So the thing I kind of want to wrap up on is, firstly, what are your thoughts on the matter? Please give me your insight, because even if you disagree with me, if you can give me all your whys, I promise you, I will listen to you. I'm definitely not somebody anymore who is bound to my limitations. And what I mean by that is, I think it was Jim Quick who said this, but he said something along the lines of, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And it opened up a doorway in my mind, because I think that we all experience that protector part that wants to retain and maintain the parts of ourselves that we know to be true right now, because it's a survival thing. However, I think that anybody who can't change their mind can't change a thing, and I have learned to be open to change my mind when I receive better and more information. And I hope that this video encourages people to also consider the same thing, because it is revolutionary. Yes, not just to the world, but to yourself in the direction that we are heading in. I think that all levels of autism are valid, and I'm sure that you probably could see that that's the way that I felt anyway. I think that I understand the very real struggles of people with level 3 autism and the carers and the loved ones, those people who have to rally around and get those support needs met. But I can promise you, when I looked at so apparently as well in one of the comments, it said that in England they don't do levels, but I actually got a level when I got my diagnosis. And it was basically because the person said that it's a spectrum, and all of the spectrum actually does have support needs. And I can say fundamentally from my report and my insights from the diagnosis that I got, I do also have support needs, and that they might not have necessarily been met at all until this point, until they have now diagnosed it, labelled it, and basically said that actually this is the support needs that Jade has, and that actually this needs to happen. And it's not a if you can, it's a absolutely fundamentally you have to do this now we know that this is here. And I've spent a lifelong navigating and pretending that I don't need that, because it makes me fit in, but I don't fit in. And I've always been somebody who's had to always sit on the fence. I've never got to dip my toe into any community because I get shunned and I don't belong there, whether it is the fact that I'm mixed race and I'm not black, but I'm also not white, so I'm not allowed to be or identify as either. And it's totally okay to be mixed race, but I live in an area where there's not many people who are that. So if I lean into any, I will be absolutely torn apart for doing so. Or it could be my curl texture. I'm not allowed to identify and have straight hair, but I'm also not able to identify as having a certain texture of curly hair. Or it could be something as much as in school I had support needs, and although they never wanted to advocate for me, I just got the label of being thick and not being able to retain the information. Or whether it is the fact that my method of coping all my life, and this was identified in my assessment, was a shutdown, which I can't stress enough as a therapist, is identical internally to the damage of the nervous system as a meltdown. And I would constantly fall asleep. They would find me asleep in school, even though I went to bed at 6 o'clock every night, and everybody else was not going to bed at 6 o'clock. I couldn't socialise to the same capacity because it was like the plug was pulled from me. If my mum took me to events, such as a meal or maybe a family party, 1 minute I would be sat there present, next minute I would be completely gone. And I would be asleep. And the struggle might be quite funny and quite quirky, which is what it always got received as. It was a bit like, oh, Jade's asleep again, and that's always just been something people have tied to me. But I'm not coping and thriving, Because if I was coping and thriving, I'd be running around with those kids and I wouldn't be having any struggle with the socialising. I wouldn't be having any struggle with receiving and maintaining the curriculum at school and being able to do everything that all those other children could do. I couldn't do that. But because I wasn't causing an outward issue or an outward problem for other people, I must not have any difficulties. And that is just fundamentally not true. And the struggle, like I said, was identified as lifelong. And that's something that we have to consider. And I'm just talking from my perspective here. At the end of the day, everybody will have a different presentation, but each presentation is valid because they've met the criteria for autism, which means that they do have support needs and that they don't get to thrive in a neurotypical world and in a neurotypical way that you think they do, just because from the outside looking in, you feel like they are. It's the same thing as mental health. If you can see somebody's mental health and it's visible, so say for example, maybe they're seeing things, or maybe they're in a hospital because their mental health is so bad, the moment that it becomes visible, I imagine that you will believe it's valid. But everybody, there's so many of the spectrum of mental health where actually, and we all probably can relate to this, where we are struggling internally and silently, and we might not be there, but we are certainly within it. We are certainly struggling with it. I will end with this. A person can drown in 7 inches of water in the same way that they can drown in 7 meters or the ocean. They are still up against the same fight, and if they don't get out, which many can, whether that's mental health or whether that is because they've got a lifelong difference that is not going anywhere, their struggles are still real. And you might not quite understand how somebody can, but they can and they are, and the struggle is something that I want more people to acknowledge. I hope this has been insightful and thought-provoking, because that's what I like to do. Again, please do let me know your thoughts, but can we please remain respectful of each other and each other's opinion, because our opinions basically come from our internal world and our internal experience. So I can delve into the idea of trying to remain balanced, but sometimes when we are emotionally activated, it's hard for us to do that. So even if you take some time away to reflect on it and come back, but please do, if you can, be respectful and let's share our opinions in the comments. Speak soon.